let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and hold healthy, carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. You ease, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and hold healthy, carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. You ease, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and hold healthy, carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. You ease, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. You ease, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. You ease, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go.
morning, and welcome to the Greater Nashville Unitarian Universalist Congregation's virtual Sunday service. I'd like to welcome everyone who is visiting for the first time. I'm Jesse Spencer Smith. I'm going to be your service coordinator today. And today is the second of our summer song series where most of our services are provided by our fellow congregants. And today we have Caren Spencer Smith, who's going to be speaking on learning the hard way, how we survived our child's mental health crisis, roughly intact. So Caren is actually in the sanctuary today, along with Laurel, and she'll be also serving as our candle lighter for the service. So let's begin by lighting our chalice. And our words for our chalice lighting are from Douglas Traversa. In a world filled with darkness and ignorance, let us bring the light of reason. In a world filled with the darkness of despair, may we share the light of hope. In a world filled with the darkness of hate, let us shine the light of love. Even though we are socially distancing, I'd like to remind everyone that we are indeed a very close-knit community and we welcome others into it. If at any time you find that you need to have someone to speak to, or if you need services, or if you'd like to connect more closely, remember that you can always reach out to our minister, Reverend Cynthia Kane. Her email is on the screen right here. You can also call or text. If there is no answer, please do leave a text for her, and she'll be able to get back with you as soon as possible. We're defined as a congregation and as a faith, not by specific creeds to which we all ascribe, but instead by an agreement that we will travel the path as we begin to understand the world, ourselves, our faith together. And so we remind ourselves of this with an affirmation that we ourselves wrote for ourselves here at Greater Nashville Unitarian Universalist Congregation. And I invite you, if you're so moved, to join in as we remind ourselves of our covenant. We covenant together to make a welcoming community, to walk together in the way of truth and love, to seek the life of the Spirit as it is known by each person, to support each other in thought, word, and deed as we work to build a better world. Today we're going to have Time for All Sages also with Caren. She's going to be sharing a story with us by Andy Green. Caren.
On a bench in a park on a bright sunny day, Wince, the monster of worry, let time slip away. He looked at the clock. It was 2:15 when Wince started to think about what he would do. He had homework and laundry. He needed clean pants. He must bake some cookies for the monster dance. Then Wince started to wonder, did he leave the light on? Was his backside too poofy? Where had all his friends gone? And his worries kept growing till he heard a soft buzz that made goosebumps appear, for he knew what it was. There was only one creature that made such a sound around monsters that worry. It could often be found. Some call it the worry bug. And this is for sure. If you feed a worry, it will always want more. Buzz, buzz, Wince heard as its noisy wings flapped. It flew up and down as he shooed and he clapped. It flittered and fluttered around Wince's ear. In the blink of an eye, more worries appeared. Did he feed his fish head? Did his dog get a bone? Did he send all his woo mail? Did he bring his bike home? Should he go to the movies? Would he get a good grade? Will the weather be nice for the Wootown parade? And with every worry that came Wince's way, the worry bug shouted, hip hip, hooray! For the more that Wince worried, the more the bug grew. It nibbled and munched on his worry-filled stew. Wince said to the worry bug, perhaps you should leave? He asked quite politely and even used please. Yet the worry bug stayed, for the two of them knew that Wince would still worry. That's what he would do. As day turned to night, Wince got ready for bed. The worry bug yawned and laid next to his head. But its buzzing kept Wince from going to sleep. So he tossed and he turned and he tried to count sheep. While thoughts of what if, could be, maybe, and might made Wince worry more, he was worried all night. When morning arrived, Wince looked up and gasped. The worry bug had grown. It had happened so fast. It used to be tiny, an annoyance quite small. Now it covered his kitchen, the ceiling, and wall. The bug's belly gurgled, full of worries it was. No longer could Wince sweep it under the rug. Its buzzing went on, and Wince started to fret about all of the things that hadn't happened just yet. No cookies were baked. The laundry had piled. Wince hadn't done homework in such a long while. Enough, Wince exclaimed. There must be a way to get rid of a worry bug. It can no longer stay. So Wince went to the library to read and take notes about catapults, cranes, wagons, and goats. He plotted and mapped out a worry bug graph, then called in the experts, the worry bug staff. Together they studied this big growing beast and built a bug net out of Wince's bed sheets. They were having such fun, Wince was worried no more. And soon he was baking and doing his chores. But just when Wince thought his work was complete, the worry bug buzzed, I need something to eat. Wince looked at the bug. It was once again small, for while Wince had been busy, he hadn't worried at all. You've ignored me all day, the tiny bug said, and you haven't been worried, so I haven't been fed. Then the bug stomped its feet and buzzed all the more. Wince took a firm stand and showed at the door. I've got things to do. I must work. I must play. I'm not going to worry, so go on your way. Buzz, buzz, Wince heard as the bug flew about, still trying to make one last worry come out. It flittered and fluttered around Wince's ear, yet Wince wouldn't give in, and it soon disappeared. Wince knew very well that this wasn't the end. The bug might be back if he worried again. But Wince would be ready, should he hear that buzz buzz, to say no to the worry bug simply because Wince had learned that his worries got bigger each day when he allowed the worry bug to nibble away. So to all of your worries, Wince wants you to know, don't feed the worry bug or your worries will grow. The end. I will comment that even though Wince was able to think his way through his bugs, that it's not always that easy. He did call in the experts, and sometimes those experts help us a little bit more. So if you have worries and you're a child, actually if you have worries and you're anybody, I encourage you to talk to somebody you love to determine whether or not it needs more to seek help, because I want you to know that you are part of a loving community, and we are here to help. The end.
Thank you so much, Caren. Every Sunday, we take some of the money which we gather during our Sunday service, during an offering, and share it with an organization that we think is important and deserving and representing our principles and our beliefs. And for the month of June, we had chosen the COVID-19 Response Fund, which seeks to address some of the hunger and needs caused by people being out of work during the COVID-19 emergency. It's founded, actually, one of the founders and chairs is former Senator Bill Frist, who also founded Nashville Health. And it's been helping our neighbors all across the metro Nashville area, and I encourage you to contribute to it. So how does Share the Plate work? Well, it simply means that half of the checks made out to GNUUC with Share the Plate, half goes to GNUUC and half goes to COVID-19 Response Fund. And same thing with online donations. So to make an online donation, you can go to nashvilleuu.org, click donate, or you can text 615-246-5553 with the amount in the account. So you simply say $20 to share or $50 to pledge, or you can mail a check. Let's go ahead and spend a few minutes listening to Billie Holiday sing Summertime to give us a chance to make our donations. But also note that Summertime is a song that Caren would sing to the children at night, or pretty much at any time, and actually pretty much in any season, to help them relax, calm down, and go to sleep.
The cotton is high. Oh, your dad is rich and your ma is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings you're going to rise up singing. Then you spread your wings and you take the sky. But till that morning, never nothing can harm you. With Daddy and Mammy standing by.
Caren Spencer Smith will offer a meditation beginning with words, a poem by Dana Folds, Enough, followed by a quiet time for reflection. Then we'll end with music A maiden sat a-weeping, music from music across the water.
In these times of stress and trouble, very few of us, are not worried or anxious. And I found these words to share with you because I hope they speak to you as much as they did to me. Enough by Dana Faltz. It is enough to offer love, no matter how imperfectly received or given. It is enough to try and fail at a difficult task, enough to fall and rise, stumble, fall again, sigh, and start to walk, however slowly, in the direction our soul points. It is enough to seek peace and find pain, to gain nothing but a vision of the truth and take the long route home. It is enough to feel temptation, the dance of the senses, the hot pool of desire, enough to call on God, walk through fire, sleep and cry and fear or welcome dying. It is enough to be and breathe, to feel the touch of wind on skin. It is enough to take the day as it comes, to watch the ripples on the lakes as a rock sinks to the bottom, to see the wild reflection of the surface calm into a mirror once again. It is enough to hear the voice of fear and hide, or seek it out and face the shame or shadows. It is enough to set out to tame demons and watch them multiply instead. It is enough to be buffeted by the winds of change and not blown over. I and you, all of us, more than enough.
A maiden sat a-weeping down by the seashore. What ails my pretty mistress? What ails my pretty mistress? What ails my pretty mistress and makes her heart sore?
Because I am weary, oh weary in mind. No comfort and no pleasure, love. No comfort and no pleasure, love. No comfort and no pleasure, love. Henceforth I will find. I'll spread my sail of silver, I'll loose my robe of silk. My mast is of the cypress tree, my mast is of the cypress tree, my mast is of makes her heart sore.
In September of 2015, the Spencer Smith household was quieter than at any time remembered. Adrian had started college in Washington, D.C. in August, and the background soundtrack of our home went with him. At the same time, I was starting a new position at work. Jesse was saving lives with sepsis prediction applications, and Laurel was 14 in 8th grade, wrapping up middle school, taking advanced classes in math and science. Jesse and I, audaciously, had patted ourselves on the back. Adrian had been a clever and precocious child in school systems that most often valued obedience over anything else, including intellectual capacity. He had been challenged by ADHD, and he had successfully found his way through social issues associated with autism spectrum disorder. We had seen child psychologists with him at several times during childhood transitions and had managed to nurture him to early adulthood. We were blessed and privileged and lived in a neighborhood zoned for excellent schools. We recognized this privilege, and we tried to teach our children that privilege has responsibility, and yet our privilege was not the same as protection. Laurel, partially from having gone through our curriculum at GNUUC, had begun to have honest and serious conversations with us about her gender identity and sexuality. This started when she was in 7th grade and continued forward. Both Jesse and I have always identified ourselves to Adrian and Laurel, even when they were little, as bisexual. And we had friends and family in our extended family reflecting a wide range of gender and sexual orientation. Within the culture of our family, we generally encouraged our children to think more broadly about gender and sexuality, at the same time acknowledging prejudice and bias in my family and the culture at large. We had good conversations with Laurel about what it meant to be bisexual, pansexual, transgendered, and how they might apply to her and her friends. By early October of that year, Laurel was struggling with homework and depression. Her sleep was disturbed. She was up at night, watching videos, chatting with friends. Our house has always been heavy on electronics and technology, with guidance, but not with strictly imposed limitations. She had a cell phone, as did most of her classmates. We don't think the technology itself had anything to do with Laurel's depression and anxiety and subsequent issues, but it permitted her to be in touch 24/7 with others who did not have her best interest at heart. I want to take a moment here and provide a trigger warning for adults who may not have heard this term before. It's for people who may become upset talking about difficult and sensitive subjects, especially when they're very personal. I will talk about the symptoms of depression in children, risk factors, suicidal ideation, self-harm, and our family's experiences with mental health counselors, therapy, and inpatient treatment. If you feel the discussion is too upsetting to listen to right now, especially at a time of so many stresses and anxieties in the broader culture, feel free to step away. If you would like to follow up with one or both of us at a later time, please reach out to us. This is why we have a minister. And our minister would love to hear from you if you really need to talk to somebody, and provide guidance on follow-ups as necessary. The purpose of this service today is to try and help others who have, are, or in the future share these experiences. According to the Merck Manual's website, doctors don't know exactly what causes depression, but chemical abnormalities in the brain are probably involved. Some tendency to develop depression is inherited. A combination of factors, including life experiences and genetic vulnerability, seems to contribute. As in adults, the severity of depression in children varies greatly. Children with major depressive disorder have an episode of depression clinically defined as lasting 2 weeks or more. Children typically have feelings of overwhelming sadness or irritability, worthlessness, and guilt. They lose interest in activities that normally give them pleasure. Many of these children also complain of physical problems, such as stomach aches or headaches. Appetite may decrease or increase, often leading to substantial changes in weight. Sleep is usually disturbed. Children may have insomnia, sleep too much, or be troubled by frequent nightmares. Depressed children are often not energetic or physically active. However, some, particularly younger children, have seemingly contradictory symptoms, such as overactivity and aggressive behavior. These children may seem more irritable than sad. Symptoms typically interfere with the ability for a child to think and concentrate, and schoolwork usually suffers. They may lose friends. Children may have suicidal thoughts and fantasies, and may even attempt suicide. Even with treatment, children with major depression disorder even without treatment, children with major depressive disorder may get better on their own in 6 to 12 months or more. However, the disorder often recurs, particularly if the first episode was severe or occurred when children were young. What I want to provide here is a list of the symptoms of depression in children. They overlap, but are not the same as adults. Feeling sad or irritable. Having no interest in favorite activities. Withdrawing from friends and social situations. Being unable to enjoy things. Feeling rejected and unloved or worthless. Feeling fatigued or without any energy. Not sleeping well and having nightmares or sleeping too much. Blaming themselves. Losing or increasing their appetite. Having problems thinking, concentrating, and making choices. Thinking about death or suicide. Giving away valued possessions. Complaining of new physical symptoms. Making lower grades in school. Jesse and I both have family histories and personal histories of anxiety and depression. We had both worked through difficult times where we were in therapy and/or prescribed medications to help. We were familiar with the science and practice behind the effective management and treatment of mental health disorders. When it became apparent that Laurel was exhibiting many of the symptoms I previously noted, we talked to friends, got recommendations of good counselors, and Laurel started seeing a therapist at Centerstone. One day, during a med check, this is the way that the Centerstone system works is that you see two different people in most cases. You see a mental health counselor, and that is a person that you see once a week, twice a week, as often as necessary to do cognitive behavior therapy. The counselor will talk to you about how your inner voices are affecting you and start to provide alternatives to those inner voices and coping behaviors. Often, children will also see a licensed nurse practitioner who is in charge of prescribing drugs. When we started on this difficult road, Laurel had received medication prescriptions from her pediatrician at the time. When we started seeing the nurse practitioner at Centerstone, those medications were changed. And as part of the medication protocol, there's at least a monthly visit with the nurse practitioner to see how things are going, to check on the medication and the state of the child. One day during a med check, the nurse practitioner who had taken over management of Laurel's prescription medications asked what I came to understand is a standard question in adolescent psychiatric care. Do you feel safe? It's such a very simple question. Do you feel safe? What it means is, do you think that you might be a danger to yourself or to others? Laurel answered no. And that was the point where my world shifted on its axis. I was lost. With additional questions on levels of self-harm and suicidal ideation, the decision was made to seek inpatient treatment. I called Jesse, who had been in Denver presenting the sepsis prediction model to a hospital administrators there, and he made arrangements to fly back early the next morning. Laurel and I went home for a night of restless sleep, picked up Jesse at the airport, and drove to Skyline Hospital's adolescent psych unit in Madison. Laurel had been under outpatient treatment for several weeks at that point. She had started, as I told you, she had started on medication with her pediatrician and changed medication at Centerstone. I've come to find out in other literature that psychiatric pharmacology, that is the medication associated with adolescent psych care, includes a wheel of options, and treatment remains still often based on trial and error. Severe depression and anxiety require multiple medications to act on different chemicals in the brain, and inpatient psychiatric care is often a result of the need to balance these medications in a controlled, supervised environment. According to a 2014 study, medical non-adherence and polypharmacology, this use of multiple medications to treat the various symptoms and issues and underlying chemical conditions associated with mental health disorders, are associated with inpatient admissions and readmissions. We met the intake counselor at Skyline Madison, who confirmed the need for Laurel to be admitted. They told Jesse and I that we were not allowed to visit or call except on designated days and times. After we walked out those doors, we would be able to talk to Laurel again on Thursday, several days later in the week. It was late morning when Jesse and I said goodbye. We left Skyline Madison. We drove to a Mexican restaurant. It was not crowded. I remember the soup was very good. We were totally and utterly lost. As Jesse mentioned before, when Laurel and Adrian were young, I would sing Summertime to them as a lullaby. Since they were little, they didn't know I often sang it out of tune. I remember thinking about this several times during the next 10 days while she was away, and often in the following months. General treatment in adolescent psychiatric care for most adolescents includes both psychotherapy and antidepressants. For younger children, psychotherapy is first and often followed, if needed, by antidepressants and medications for anxiety. Guidance for family members and school staff is critical. We reached out to Laurel's counselors at school. We found the strength to reach out to our family and tell them what was going on. We called Adrian and let him know that, that Laurel was in trouble, but that we were taking care of her and of the situation. Treatment of depressive disorders depends on the severity of symptoms. Any child who has suicidal thoughts should be closely supervised by experienced mental health care practitioners. If risk of suicide is high enough, children require hospitalization to keep them safe. For most adolescents, a combination of psychotherapy and drugs is more effective than either alone. Jesse and I knew this from his graduate work in the Department of Psychology in Indiana. And so we were prepared for this. Psychotherapy alone may be tried first, and drugs are often used only if needed. Individual psychotherapy, group therapy, and family therapy may be beneficial. Doctors also advise family members and the school on how they can continue to help children function and learn. There was a system set up by which we were supposed to be able to go to the middle school, pick up work assigned by Laurel's teachers, and drop off her books and other things she needed for school at Skyline Madison. The school, there was a system set up for the school to follow up with faxes and communication with the facility so she could continue her classes. I will say two things. That the system is far less than perfect, and it didn't matter to us at the time. We were a lot more concerned about Laurel, her short and long-term health, and her emotional stability than we were about grades in school. Antidepressant drugs can help correct chemical imbalances in the brain. Drugs called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, called fluoxetine, sertraline, paroxetine, I may not be pronouncing these well, are drugs most commonly prescribed for depressed children and adolescents. Some other antidepressants, including tricyclic antidepressants, such as imipramine, may be slightly more effective, but they tend to have more side effects, so they are rarely used in children. We'll say that any psychotropic medication, any medication for helping to reduce the symptoms of depression, anxiety, OCD, mental health issues across the board, have side effects. They do not just provide good. And that goes back into the idea of inpatient treatment for children who are on one or more medications, is trying to find out the balance of the dose of an individual medication, the combination of multiple medications, the combination of multiple medications and psychotherapy to best treat an individual child. There were times, when Jesse and I felt that the side effects were perhaps too bad, too awful to continue. And we sought feedback from professionals and were guided on the idea that sometimes it starts off like this, but we would make sure that Laurel was kept safe and secure in the spaces that she needed to be while the medications began to help her move all of her brain chemistry back in order. I want to talk briefly about antidepressants in children and suicide. So again, if this is a topic that is too close, too disturbing, too triggering for you, I encourage you to just walk away for a little while and we can talk about it sometime later. There was a lot of press at one time that antidepressants may cause an increase in the risk of suicidal thinking and behavior in children and adolescents. We had read these studies. We knew it. We talked to our counselors about it. This concern has led to an overall decrease in the use of antidepressants in children. However, the decrease in the use of antidepressants in children and adolescents has been associated with an increase in the rate of death by suicide, perhaps because depression is then not adequately treated in some children. Studies have been done to try and settle this issue. They found that suicidal thoughts and attempts may increase very slightly in children who take antidepressants, especially when they first start therapy. However, most doctors believe that the benefit outweighs the risk, and children with depression often benefit from drug treatment as long as doctors and family members are alert for worsening symptoms or suicidal thoughts. Whether or not drugs are used, suicide is always a concern in a child or adolescent with depression. There is, sadly, no too young for suicidal thoughts. I don't do that to scare you. I just want you to let you know. The following can help reduce the risk. Parents and mental health care practitioners should talk about the issue in depth. If you don't understand something, talk more. If you still don't understand something, talk even more. Do your research. Ask friends. I guarantee you don't have to go far to find someone who has shared these experiences with you. The child or adolescent should be supervised appropriately. What that means is that the child's cycle from waking to sleeping to waking again should be monitored. It should not necessarily be shut down. I told Laurel that at times I felt like I wanted to just wrap her in bubble wrap and tissue paper, and then some packing tape, and then more bubble wrap and more tissue paper until she looked like the guy from the movie.
Willy Wonka?
No, not Willy Wonka, in the big snowsuit with the rifle.
What?
With the, and he walks out and he's just all, and he falls in the snow.
Oh,
A Christmas Story. A Christmas Story?
Yeah.
A Christmas Story. But we couldn't do that. What we did is we tagged off. We made sure somebody was home whenever she came home from school. We saw her to school. We kept in touch with her counselors. And after that first time, a second time, when she was in high school in 9th grade, a second inpatient a therapy session at Madison Skyline again. My third on my list before I go to that point. Regular psychotherapy sessions should always be included in the treatment plan. So, parents and mental health practitioners talk about the issue in depth with each other, not necessarily with the child. The idea is to create that plan to take care of the child. The child and adolescent should be supervised appropriately, not locked up, not shut down, not wrapped in bubble wrap with packing tape, but enough to make sure that they're safe, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and regular psychotherapy sessions as part of that treatment plan. Laurel continued counseling after her hospitalization, started high school, continued to struggle, was readmitted, changed medications, and moved forward. Jesse and I moved forward. Years passed, and we find ourselves again in a time of crisis. This time external to our family or any individual in it. Laurel was having a really great senior year. From the time she started struggling in 8th grade through her junior year, we held her accountable to her grades, but we didn't want to enforce always to the extent that she knew she was capable. We wanted her to drive that herself, accept responsibility, and especially not put more pressure on herself than she needed to at the time. It worked out okay. And by the time she started her senior year, she was doing theater. She was making great grades without any nagging whatsoever. She was really into the school experience and starting to think about college as well. When school did not resume after spring break, both Jesse and I worried about Laurel. This time, that made a huge difference was that we were all in the house together. From the time we woke up to the time we went to bed, even when we did not wake up at the same time. And we often found ourselves on overlapping schedule, where Jesse and I would get up for work, Laurel would get up sometimes much later, stay up much later, but we balanced this out and it worked in our household. We always overlapped with each other. We always talked, and we watched Laurel learn how to manage the new normal. We worried about ourselves and others. We struggled, all three of us, all four of us really. Adrian, in touch with us, but still in St. Louis at the time, with the daily onslaught of bad news followed by worse news. But today, and why we're giving this talk, is because our daughter has passed on to another, more resilient version of herself that she built herself. Although Jesse and I were there to catch and guide and make things safe when they needed to be, she did this work. And I'm so very proud of her for that. She found her voice, and she uses that voice to speak out for righteousness and civil liberties. She leads chants on marches and rallies. She helps direct traffic and draws healthy boundaries with her friends. She has joined others of her age to stand up against causes including insufficient gun regulation. She celebrated Pride Week. She has spoken out against the injustice of police brutality, especially directed at people of color. We are so happy to see her making plans for her future. She did not see for herself during her darkest times. And this is what we learned. We could not protect our child from bad things in life, but we could make the road a little easier, even when it was very uncomfortable for us to do so. We did not keep secrets from her, from each other, from our friends, co-workers, or family. Sometimes we didn't always tell people right away what we were doing and what was going on, but we always managed to not treat this big issue in our lives as something horrible or something embarrassing or something that Laurel needed to be ashamed of. We talked to her about it being a chemical imbalance, and that over time that she would come out of it, even when we weren't absolutely certain that that was true. We learned that these things take a very long time. I remember thinking when she was first in therapy and started medications, I asked if there was a possibility of her being tapered off. Remember, this was October of 2015. I remember asking if there was a possibility of her being tapered off medications by the end of the year. And the nurse practitioner, who was lovely and wonderful, and I will always keep her in my thoughts, said, "Caren, no. It is at least a year and sometimes years." She says it can take up to 4 years for an adolescent to work through a mental health crisis. Even with all of this, we respected Laurel's agencies in many decisions, and we negotiated limits on things like her cell phone respectfully but firmly. We would take away her phone at night, and we would plug it in our room, and we would show her where it was, and she could come and retrieve it after she had slept in the morning. But we talked to her, and she eventually came to find that she slept better when she was not disturbed by texts or other notifications of people who are not keeping her best interests at heart. Jessie and I followed the rule of flying. Put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. We made sure that at least one of us at any given time was in a good place to help Laurel and each other through whatever needed to be done. Sometimes it was both of us. At other times, it was one or the other while we dealt with our personal challenges, our underlying issues, and our concern for Laurel. We encouraged Laurel to work through her challenges at her own pace. We pointed out the outcomes of her decisions related to schoolwork, and we let her take responsibility as much as possible. And at this point, I wanted to just take a little bit of time and talk with Laurel on one or two questions, and to get her side of this. Oh,
I'm just looking at the...
okay. She's also keeping track of the service. You have the entire Spencer Smith household, especially if Adrian's awake. I'm not certain, but here we all are. Hi, Jessie. This is kind of what we mean by physically distant, but still together. So Laurel, we've talked a lot about questions that we would do at this part. Do you have any one in particular that you want to address, or do you want me to just ask you? I wanted to talk about your friends at Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
How many of your friends at Renaissance had issues with mental health, anxiety, depression, OCD?
I would say every single one of my friends did. A lot of people tend to look at like mental health issues as something that's like kind of out of the norm,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very, very common.
Yeah.
I think depression is the most common. So almost all of us had a different struggle.
Do we want to talk about contributing factors to anxiety and depression in adolescence? One of the biggest decisions we made when you were in 8th grade was for you to go to Renaissance High School
Mm-hmm.
in Franklin instead of going to Brentwood High School.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian had gone to Brentwood, had done great. You did not want to go.
Nope.
And why was that?
It's a very large school. I would still be around a lot of the people that were not very good for me. And I was starting to come to terms that they weren't, and that I could, in fact, distance myself from them. I just saw Renaissance as like a smaller school where they paid more attention to mental health issues. It was just more attuned to me.
You know, there's this, and it's still, I read about it in an article yesterday, the idea that mental health and creativity are tied together. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's kind of a very big outlet for a lot of people who struggle with mental health, whether it be like music or painting or theater. You'll find that a lot of them are looking for an outlet for stuff that's going on in their life.
So you think that the creativity comes from the mindset and not that the mindset is part of that creativity?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense, and that is good. What have you done recently? Okay, let me rephrase this. What do you like best about yourself now?
I know how to firmly place boundaries. I know how to put myself first.
You found your voice. I love all the protest pictures of you. When I was going through a series of pictures with Laurel, it was like half of them, it was like Never Again, Black Lives Matter, Pan Pride. I like that you do that. And I like that, one more, anxiety. And so when was the last time, one of the things that bothered you the most, other than you had nightmares, you had headaches, you had stomach aches, you had all of the classic symptoms. You had panic attacks.
Yep.
You had them here, you had them at school, you had them at home. When was the last panic attack that you had?
It was definitely an outlier, but I had one, I think it was last week. I hadn't had one for a long time before that. But I was able to guide myself through it really quickly. And
Where were you?
I was at work.
Okay, and what did you do?
Went to the back, drank some water, and did 4-square breathing until I could
What's
head back out.
What's 4-square breathing?
You breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, repeat.
And how often do you repeat that?
Until you start to feel better, until you can breathe like normal.
Okay. And that 4-square breathing, then it keeps you from hyperventilating? And at the same time gives you something to focus on. Other than your anxiety. Thank you. I love you very much. I'm so very proud of you. The other thing, and here, let me go ahead and highlight Laurel here too. I can't speak for everybody, but there are things that your children may want to do, some of which are less long-term than others. Hair will always grow out. Laurel found very early on this creative expression in her hair and hair color and in drawing with Sharpies on her skin. And although, it may not be for everybody, it worked so well for her. And she doesn't have a lot of Sharpie on her skin all the time anymore, and her hair still changes color, and it's great. Piercings, we have discussions about, and we still are having discussions about tattoos, but she's 18 now, and I get to give my opinion, but I don't need to give her permission. So I just trust her to do that herself. I'm going to segue in closing here and talk about how lucky and privileged and yet unprotected by our privilege, our white privilege, our economic privilege, our educational privilege we found ourselves to be. If we wanted to, as a congregation and a community, make a social impact on mental health, we would continue to demand the systematic deconstruction of institutional racism and inherent bias in the American education, economic, and criminal justice systems. According to a recent study, 41% of Black Americans suffer from stress, anxiety, and depression. The result is a notable difference in longevity, even when other factors are controlled. A person's last words before they die should not be, "I can't breathe," because people are keeping him from breathing. A person should not be sentenced to death while they run away from police for the crime of having passed out in a Wendy's parking lot in Atlanta, even if he was running away with the officer's taser in his hand. We can help. We can individually and collectively address our inherent bias and develop what I have read to be called a color enlightenment. It's not to be colorblind, but it's to see where we fit in the spectrum of our society. So I use the service in the best way possible to close with, tied so desperately to mental health, and something that is within our reach to change, that Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Caren.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we see, no, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. Oh, darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. If the sky we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountains should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear. Just as long as you stand by me. Oh, darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, you just stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me.
Let's take a few moments and recognize the joys and sorrows that have shaped our lives over the past week. Caren is also serving as the candle lighter for us today. So if you have a joy or concern that you would like to share, I offer you to raise your hand. I'll unmute you and you can share. Do keep in mind, of course, that we are recording this as well for later viewing. So keep that in mind as you decide what to share. If you have a joy or concern to share, please just raise your hand and I will unmute you. Let me also go to the phones. Linda, I'm going to take a moment and Marjorie, I see you now. You'll have to unmute yourself. Charles. There you go. You got it.
Charles and I celebrated our 64th year of marriage last Tuesday. So I'd like a candle of joy for 64 years of marriage.
Light a candle to recognize your shared joy.
If we had 64 candles, we would light them all.
can start.
Are there other joys or sorrows to share? Susan, you can unmute yourself.
I just wanted to thank everybody that posted on Facebook about my birthday. I had a great day and spent part of it on Zoom for about an hour and a half talking to all of the Germans. And I got to see my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and three of their four kids and all of the grandkids, and we just had a rollicking good time. So it was really a fun day.
Thank you. I light a candle in celebration of your birthday and your shared experiences.
All right, Linda, I'm going to unmute you if you'd like to share a joy or a concern.
Okay, actually, I just sort of texted it to you, but I'll share it with everybody. And this is specifically to Caren and Laurel, and my joy that the two of you did this presentation. And I want to say thank you so much for your intelligence and above all, your depth of caring about our community, which gives you the heroism to share your story with us. I think it is so important, and you've added great depth to my knowledge.
Thank you, Linda. Light a candle.
And Barbara, I'll unmute you. So Barbara, go ahead if you have a joy or a concern to share. All right, I'll go ahead and I'll mute you again. Let's light one final candle for all those joys and concerns too deeply held to be shared. We'll hear Spirit of Life, first in Spanish and then in English, as we recognize all that we've heard.
First
I invite you to join in the words for the chalice extinguishing, which are shared in the chat as Caren extinguishes the candles and the chalice for us this week. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in and among us now and always. Our closing words are from Rumi. Your acts of kindness are iridescent wings of divine love which linger and continue to uplift others long after your sharing. Go in peace. I invite everyone to stay as we unmute everyone and enter a time where we can chat, share some coffee, and do know I might need to mute a few folks if you have